Hey, it's your friend Choice CJ here, and this is my team builder for week 6 of GBA D-League, season number 4. We are going up against its Gregulator, and Greg's someone I've known in the community for a while now. He's fairly well known, I suppose, for being a talented player and a overall trickster. So shoutouts to him. I hope that we have a good game. I'm doing this pretty late, so you're supposed to play the matches like a week ahead of time, but Greg and I have had some scheduling issues, mostly from my fault. I was out all last weekend, and it was hard to schedule during the week. So, you know, I know a lot of people like to give shit to Greg for postponing matches. I'm not going to use the J word, but it was at least mutual blame this time. So thanks to him for being flexible with my schedule and for being a good sport. This is a pretty important game for us. We've lost 3 games in a row in the D-League. We did just finally break our overall 6-game losing streak in the MPL on Friday. If you guys missed that upload, go check it out. I guess I sort of revealed the result to you guys, but it's still a fun game. So I do want you guys to go watch that video. But yeah, if we win this, I think we're kind of in the thick of the playoff race. If we lose, it's going to be tricky to stay up with the pace of everybody else who's at least 500 or better. Because winning this game would put us to 500. It would put us to 3-3. But, you know, Greg, even though his record is sort of poor this season, I know the caliber of player he is, and if he really puts his mind to it, he can really take on anybody. So, let's look at his squad, and let's talk about the matchup. He has Tapu Koko, Greninja, Mienshao, Gliscor, Yanmega, Goodra, Heatran, Mega Scizor, Seismitoad, Quilladin, and Musharna. So, he has a lot of Volt Turn action on this team, which is pretty spooky to me. And his first 2 mons there that you see, the Koko and the Greninja in particular, are really, really scary. Because they outspeed all of my team, both of them, and they sort of beat one another's checks. So, like, in theory, my electric resists are things like Latios, Celebi, and Gligar. And so if I try and switch any of those things in on Koko, he can easily just U-turn and go into Greninja, and Greninja has super effective stabs to hit all of those mons super effectively. Even something like Swampert, like both Greninja and Koko get Grass Knot, so it's not even a very good check to it. So it's going to be very hard to play around that. I sort of have an unconventional way of dealing with the Koko at least. Other mons that are really scary potentially, Scizor, extremely spooky. It's just SD roost sets are really hard for me to deal with because I only have Darmanitan to hit it with super effective stab. I guess most teams are not going to have dual fire types, so maybe that's sort of a moot point. But I feel like a lot of my mons are SD bait for Scizor. Gliscor is something that's very scary to me, not because it's like necessarily that scary on its own, but because Greg has shown to really like SD Gliscor. So I know that can be an issue if I'm not prepared for it. It could stall out some of my team if I don't pack the right sets. You know, Mega as well is pretty scary. Just because whether it's Speed Boost or Tinted Lens, I don't have responses to it. So, like, I'm forced to bring Klefki just so I have a switch in for Life Orb, Bug Buzz, or Choice Specs Bug Buzz. Otherwise, it just annihilates my team. So that's definitely scary for sure. You know, there's tons of other things that are scary as well besides that. But those are the main things I have my eye on. I guess I just described like half his team, but we are going to do our best to take it on. We've got some nice sets, I think, that'll take advantage of some of his likely brings. Let's start with our first mon here, which is our Wincon. This is a Vincoon. It's not necessarily a traditional Vincoon, it's a bit slower than normal, but it sounds kind of dumb. I wanted to have enough special attack investment that I could deal with Spadef Gliscor, because some variants of Gliscor could potentially not deal with me, but it sort of depends, right? Like, I guess if he has a lot of Spadef, he doesn't necessarily have enough speed, so we'll be able to outspeed and hit with Scald for some decent damage. If he's got just a tiny bit of speed, like I've got enough speed on here for Gliscor plus 3 points. So if he just wants to go up to like 120, and then that still leaves him with like 230 some EVs to put into Spadef, it could definitely deal with us. So I thought that getting just a tiny bit of speed and putting the rest into special attack would be nice. It also helps me deal with Scizor a little bit better because Scizor, if it's bulky, is only gonna be taking like even with this investment, I'm only taking like it's only taking like 25% from Scald. But I just wanted that tiny bit of investment. Excuse me. We played really late at night last night. It was like 1:15 a.m. when we started playing. I went to the movies. I saw Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, and I saw Ocean's 8, both of which were pretty fun. If you guys saw either of those movies and you enjoyed them, let me know down in the comments below. They were really great. But anyway, like that was another complication in our scheduling was I had booked those movies, and I hit him up on Friday, being like, "Hey, this is my schedule for Saturday," and then he messaged me back finally, like part of the way through Saturday. He's like, "Yeah, I can play after like 8 or 9 EST," and it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna be gone from like 7 to midnight." So it worked out because we were able to play after I got back. But anyway, Suicune, main win con. I just need to get rid of Coco because that thing is a threat. Even if I'm not able to eliminate it immediately, if I knock out something and am able to maintain a sub, he'll bring it in and I'll be able to throw off a Scald on something. Like he might just Volt Switch on my Suicune, break the sub, and then have something else take the Scald. But that's kind of the thought process with Suicune. So, in addition to Suicune this week, we have a wall-breaking Lottie. I was going to be a mixed set with EQ, but I thought Surf was better. Surf allows me to still hit Heatran very, very hard, but it allows me to deal with Gliscor. If I was Earthquake, I'd be relying on Draco Meteor, and a Spadef Gliscor should be able to take Draco Meteor. And because I'm giving myself the special attack drops, losing 2 stages each time, he'll be able to 1v1 me with relative ease. Draco, just because it hits the rest of his team hard, hit Power Fire for hitting the Scizor. This does really great versus anything that's not named Coco or Greninja. So that's going to be the thought here. It can potentially drink 1 hit from both of those Mons because like Greninja does have super effective stab, but it's not, like Greninja's not the strongest Mon without a boosting item. And Coco as well, if it's relying on its Fairy Stab, it doesn't have that great special attack. The reason its electric type moves are great is because of electric terrain. And then like Tapu Koko in general is just good, not so much as a breaker, but as a good revenge killer and as a very good momentum gainer. The thing with Coco is I am a little bit worried about Farium. Like Farium would blow me back, so I have to sort of scout for that. He might not be Farium because he is probably going to want U-turn just for the general momentum, plus it hits some of my best electric switch-ins, like I mentioned. HP Ice for Gliscor makes sense. And then electric coverage, and then the last slot could be that fairy move. It could also be Grass Knot to deal with Swampert, but if he's just Dazzling Gleam with Farium, that makes sense. That's probably going to hit Swampert pretty hard anyway, and even if it doesn't, he can just U-turn out on Swampert into like anything. But yeah, other than that, and other than Greninja, which we can potentially still drink a hit from if we absolutely need to, Lottie is great versus his team. Next, we have Klefki. Klefki is really important in this matchup to be a switch into Yanmega, Gudra, things like that. Yanmega in particular. But what's really great about Klefki in this matchup is Spikes. Spikes hit a lot of his team. Like his team in general, besides Gliscor, is fairly susceptible to hazards, whether it's spikes or rocks. Like his spikes resists, which are Yanmega and Gliscor. Like Yanmega obviously gets hit 4 times super effectively by rocks. So if I can get up rocks in addition to spikes, that's going to neutralize that throw quite a bit. He does have a couple of ways of hitting Klefki for super effective damage between his 2 ground types and Heatran. But that said, Recycle is still pretty decent in this matchup. I just need to be careful with keys because if he has like a knockoff Scizor and he knocks off my Wiki Berry, obviously I can no longer Recycle. So I just have to be weary of that. HP Fire is so that I'm not bait for Scizor, and then Player Off hits the most of the rest of his team pretty hard. It doesn't allow me to touch Heatran at all, but I think between like Lottie, really just Lottie is going to be my Heatran switch in. I don't want to potentially risk a burn on Suicune, because if that gets burned, it kind of reduces the effectiveness of that set, since I'm relying on Leftovers recovery with Protect and things like that to heal up. But yeah, other than that, I think Klefki is actually quite valuable in this game. So next up, let's go to Celebi. Celebi is a sort of bulky offensive set this week. We have enough speed on here for Heatran, so we can U-turn out on that. Stealth Rock, U-turn, Giga Drain, Hidden Power, Ice. So Hidden Power Ice allows me to deal with Gliscor quite a bit. Gliscor, or Celebi's probably my number one switch into Gliscor. Lottie deals with it relatively well, but it doesn't have the bulk investment that Celebi does, and Celebi just has better natural bulk to begin with. Also, if he's like a toxic Gliscor, Celebi doesn't really care about that because we do have Natural Cure. HP Ice does 2-hit KO spit up variants of that. Giga Drain is just important for Toad and things like that. This Mon always switches in on Toad and always gets up rocks. Toad is fairly likely on his end as his response to Darmanitan, because an offensive Darmanitan kind of goes in versus his team. So he'll probably have some sort of defensive variant with that, which means he'll probably put rocks on it. And then U-turn is just nice in general because if I'm not taking the turn to set up rocks, like I can pretty much U-turn on anything that wants to switch into me, such as Goodra, such as Scizor, and I can go into the appropriate threat. It's like Darmanitan or Lottie, for example. So just quite nice in this matchup, I think. Yeah, those rocks are going to be really pivotal, especially if he has you on Mega, but just in general, because since his team relies on pivoting so much, any amount of hazards really punishes that. In addition to punishing momentum with hazards, we have a Rocky Helmet Darm, which is going to help punish that as well, particularly any momentum coming out of Scizor. So we are almost fully physically defensive. Fire Punch, U-turn, Earthquake, Toxic. Fire Punch just to bop Scizor, of course. U-turn for momentum. Earthquake to hit his number one Darm check, or one of his Darm checks being Heatran, and then Toxic to hit the other Darm check, which is Seismitoad. We got enough speed on here for Jolly Scizor. No, this is also for Jolly, or Timid Heatran. I think this Mon is pretty nice. It's not the best because he could have the hazards, which limits this thing's longevity, but if I can just get Chip on Scizor between Helmet and hazards, I can whittle that thing down really fast, actually. And if nothing else, I can force him to go for Roosts instead of Sword Dances, which is pretty important. Then last but not least, we do have my spiciest member this week. It is a Choice Scarf Gligar. I know that MV did run this in Season 8. That's the previous season, right? I'm pretty sure it is. This is my first time bringing Gligar this season. There's a reasonable chance that it's my last time bringing Gligar, because after my match with Leo, we do have the free agent transaction deadline, and because Gligar's sort of been an unmon for me, I'm looking to potentially get rid of it. So whether someone wants it in a trade or if I can just drop it to free agency, that's what I'm thinking. Gligar, yes, it's a nice bulky mon, especially with a Violite, but it just is sort of too passive for my liking, and it doesn't get enough coverage to make up for how passive it is. Like, you could have mons that are generally passive, like, I don't know, Miltank, Bronzong, just things like that. But at least they have good coverage, right? Like, Miltank has, like, Fire Punch if it wants to not be taken advantage of by Scizor. It's got Earthquake to hit things like Heatran, etc., etc. So it has ways to deal with its likely counters. Gligar does not. It doesn't have Fire Fang. It doesn't have Ice Fang. So, like, Greg's Scizor and his Gliscor can be problems for Gligar. That being said, the reason that Gligar is Scarf this week is to get a surprise KO on Tapu Koko. Because my team does not deal with Tapu Koko at all. Like, it really doesn't. So, I'm going to lead with my Gligar and hope that he leads Koko in response. Koko is a pretty likely lead on his end, just because it does outspeed my entire team naturally. And unless I lead with something like Scarf Darm, like, he's going to feel fairly free. And even if I do lead with Darm, he can just immediately go into something like Seismitoad, take a Flare Blitz, and he'll probably even be packing Rocky Helmet to do the most amount of recoil damage to Darm. Like, that's the best way to deal with Darm, is to get all the recoil up, get up rocks, and then Darm at best gets off 1 to 2 Flare Blitzes in a game. Other than that, it's not that great. So, like, he'll probably lead with Koko, and then if, then I could deal with, then he'd make a move accordingly. But if I lead with Gligar, he's just going to think, oh, well, I can just U-turn out on this into whatever, like Seismitoad to get up rocks, or into Gliscor. But if I can pop him with that turn 1 Earthquake, that's going to put me in really great shape. Technically speaking, he does need max speed in order to outspeed a max speed Raikou. He needs a timid nature in order to outrun a max speed Raikou. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he'll do that. Like, the benefit of him running timid is that he could put a bit into bulk, right? Which would make my EQ a little bit less likely to kill. Like, we do 104% min to a uninvested Koko, but if he puts investment in, there's potentially rolls where he would survive. But there's a reasonable chance that he still runs Modest, because Raikou, I don't need max speed Raikou. I just need enough to outrun Mienshao, which hits 178 at level 50. So if I go to 179 with Raikou, Koko then with a Modest Nature can outspeed that sort of Raikou. So we'll see if he chooses to do that or not. But yeah, I'm hoping he doesn't have that bulk. And even if he does, we're going to get a chunk off on that Koko. Getting the KO is best, but getting the chunk off is still good, because if I do get up hazards and I get him to, 10%, then he is going to die to Reentry to hazards, which would be fantastic. So that's the plan with Gligar. Just try and snipe that. And then just the U-turn momentum in general adds to my team. If I can beat his U-turn momentum with my own, I think that puts me in a good position. Because if he's having to pivot around to deal with my threats, he's going to be racking up lots of hazard damage. So hazards is just a good strategy this game. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be my team builder. It's a little long, so thanks for bearing with me, but hopefully it was informative. This is going up at 4 p.m. EST on Sunday, which is a day late, but like I said, we hadn't even battled up to this point yesterday. And then the battle's going to go up at 6 p.m. Eastern, so make sure you check that out. Make sure you check out my buddy Greg, and make sure you check out to my channel for other gaming and Pokemon content. We've got the last week of MPL coming up next week, and that is going to be pretty exciting, so stay tuned. Until the next time, I will see you guys later.